Hello, hello, my sweeties, and welcome to another episode of Oh My Anime Podcast. This is your host, Mimi Hime, and today we'll be talking about my mid-season winter anime reviews for 2021. Let's get into it. So far I am watching 9 airing shows this winter 2021 anime season. I do intend on picking up quite a few shows once the season is over during that sort of in-between week between seasons. But for now, I have somewhat settled on 9 airing shows. So in no particular order, I am just going to give my personal impressions and sort of give my mid-season ratings of the shows. These ratings could definitely change because there's obviously still a whole half a season left. So, you know, you'll just have to stay tuned for my final impressions and my final ratings, which will come in about 5 to 6 weeks, probably more on the 6 to 7 week end, because I'm going to want to make sure that, I finish all of the shows that, for instance, like, some are 12 episodes, some are 13, some are 16, etc. So I'm not going to do it until all of the shows have concluded. But anyway, starting with the first show, we'll start with Quintessential Quintuplets. So, Quintessential Quintuplets, if you don't know about that show, it's essentially about these quintuplets, and they're all dumb as rocks, and they need this tutor, Futaro, to tutor them. And they need to be tutored in everything. They are literally failing every single subject. And so the first season came out a year or two ago. I don't quite remember when. But obviously it's kind of a harem show. The game, I believe it's based off of. I think it's based off of a game or a light novel. It might be both. Anyway, it's essentially, I know for a fact there's a game, and you can essentially go on a love path with, whichever quintuplet of your choosing. But obviously once it gets adapted into an anime, there is obviously a, key winner in the show, which in the first season there's no real indicator who it is, and then the second season I feel like they kind of try to give you hints as to who it's going to be for the show, but we really don't know yet. There's lots of red herrings and things like that. But anyway, it is a really cute show. I really enjoy it. Each of the quintuplets is super wonderful. So you've got, let's see, there's Itsuki, Ichika, Nino, Miku, and Yotsuba. So, and that was absolutely not in order. I definitely should have done them in order. But anyway, I didn't. So, it's super cute because they all have their own personalities and they're all trying to be unique in their own right. But they're all obviously in love with, their sisters, and they all care about each other. And there's a huge family bond. And then you have Futaro, who is trying to teach them, but they're all over the place, and they're super well off, and their dad is sort of like a prick and doesn't really care about their social lives and stuff too much. He doesn't really father them. So it's just like kind of a cute everyday slice of life romance show. There's nothing super fantastical about it. It's kind of funny because when Futaro was a child, he had blonde hair, was a total rebel, and it's implied that like 5 years ago, when he was still this sort of like rebel character, he must have met one of the 5 quintuplets, and he's in love with her, but we don't know, once again, we don't know which quintuplet he fell in love with in Kyoto 5 years ago on a school trip. But then obviously now Futaro is like a completely different person. You know, his hair is the standard black hair. He's a tutor, so he's always wearing like a sweater vest and always looks super nerdy and things like that. So it's just like a really down-to-earth show. For those of you who enjoyed Tonikawa Over the Moon for You, which was a Crunchyroll original series that aired last season, if you're into those kinds of like romantic comedy slice of life shows, then I would definitely recommend Quintessential Quintuplets. If I were to give this show a rating right now, it would probably be somewhere between, I don't know, like a 7 or an 8. It's not a great, like, it's not a masterpiece, right? Nothing ever really surprises me. Obviously, I'm into waifu culture, so, like, I have my preference of the quintuplets, which is Miku. She's the third, I believe, and, I'm pretty positive she's not going to be the, like, main girl at the very end, but regardless, she's my main girl. And yeah, I give it like a 7 or 8. It's a very enjoyable show. I obviously would recommend it to anyone who's into slice of life or romance shows, but there's nothing out of the ordinary about it. There's nothing super special about it. There's nothing super surprising that happens in it. So for that reason, I would give it, you know, a 7 if, for instance, like they push a girl who they've never pushed, or you know, if pacing were to suddenly drop off or something like that, I would probably give it a 7. But, you know, if it continues on the path it's going right now, I project that I will be giving it an 8 at the end of the season. Moving on to the next show, I am watching Dr. Stone, Stone Wars, which is the second season of the Dr. Stone show. It is a Crunchyroll original, I believe. They were heavily promoting and advertising for Dr. Stone when it originally aired. And I will have to admit, when the show first came out, and by first came out, I mean when the first season came out, I was not too invested in the show. The pacing in the middle of the season kind of caught me off guard because it just was like slower than I expected. And you know, I dropped it for a little bit. I didn't really drop it. I think I watched maybe 6 or 7 episodes, and then I dropped it for 5 or 6 weeks, and then I picked it up again right before the end. And I think I watched the last like 4 or 5 episodes airing. And so I'm super happy that I did, because I really do enjoy the premise. I am quite a nerd and geek myself, so I really am into sort of sciencey stuff. I really enjoyed seeing how Senku has been able to successfully incorporate science into this stone world where you're starting all over again. And I guess it's kind of like, I don't know, like interesting to think about, like, if this really did happen in the real world. Like, do we have people like Senku in the real world that like could manage to create a telephone or an automobile and things like that? Like, does anyone know science well enough to be able to pull that off? Like, I don't know, probably not. But what, we're like 5 episodes in. There's supposed to be 11 episodes this season, and so far the show is very enjoyable. So if I were to rate it today, I'd probably give it about an 8. I don't suspect that it will go lower than an 8, but it's possible. They could obviously have some kind of plot twist or something that I just heavily disagree with. So that could drop it down to a 7. And it could also end really well. It could end on a really good cliffhanger, and go into a 3rd season. So I could potentially give this season a 9. I do think it's kind of on the fence right now, because, you know, this is one of those shows that, you know, it sets its own pace. And so sometimes, like, a lot of things could happen at once, or like nothing could happen. But this definitely seems like the season of action, so I think it'll at least be an 8, and I think it has potential to be a 9. Another thing I'm currently watching this season is Yashahime. And even though Yashahime is not exactly like an exclusively winter 2021 anime, it will be ending at the end of winter. It's slated for 24 episodes and we're currently on episode 18. 19 will be airing, by today when this episode drops. So there's not too many episodes left of Yashahime for like this current season. I don't know if they're going to be doing it in season or cours or what. I imagine it's going to be about as long as the original series, which hopefully not. Hopefully it just needs maybe another 24, 25 episode season and then it'll be concluded, but whatever. Yashahime has been kind of a mixture of hit and miss for me in these past 18 episodes. I will say it's improved. It's certainly improved because I feel like it really started off really slow. I didn't really care for any of the girls. I was really irritated because we knew that the entirety of the original cast was alive, but we didn't know what happened to them, but they kept being hinted at, and so I was a little irritated that they kind of kept like, I don't know, like beating around the bush about what was going on with the original cast. And so now in recent episodes we know what's going on with the original cast. There's still questions, but at least we have like some seriously needed answers that make everything make sense now. So I'm enjoying it a lot more. So if you had asked me when the show first started airing, I probably would have been like, no, this show is like a 5, maybe a 6. Right now, I definitely have Yashahime around the 7 category. I don't really know. I feel like it's really going to depend on how Yashahime ends for the season, because while it's been really good, it did have a really slow start, and I also just don't really know where they're going with Shishomaru's character in particular. They have kind of really, I don't know, like hyped up, or I don't know what's going on with Shishomaru, and it's both like interesting and also annoying at the same time, because they've kind of got him as this like, he still seems to care about power, but he's obviously doing shady stuff, but he seems to be doing that shady stuff for the benefit of Rin. But then I also was like, but then how did Rin even get into this situation? And then in a recent episode, it was like he was trying to protect his daughters, but then not really. So I don't know. I really just don't know what they're doing with Shishomaru's character in this new series. And I think that's probably one of like the biggest loose ends that they haven't tied together. And it was like a loose end that I don't think anyone was anticipating, because I don't think any of us, I don't know. I mean, I guess for those of people who are really upset about the Shishomaru Rin fandom, then I guess, you know, Shishomaru having half demon daughters was extremely unexpected. But then on the other hand, I think for those people like myself who did anticipate it and did expect it, it's one of those things like, if he was gonna have, you know, half demon kids, I don't know, I guess I thought he was gonna soften up more. But then I guess it does play to character that he hasn't softened up, so I don't know. I'm a little all over the place with Shishomaru's character, and I feel like wherever his character lands at the end of the season will be how I rate the show. So for right now, I'm just gonna give it like sort of a down the middle 7. It's not bad, it's not good. Horimiya. Horimiya is arguably the best romance anime of the season. It's definitely giving Tonikawa Over the Moon for You a run for its money as far as like best romance comedy in recent times. It's definitely giving Tonikawa a run for its money, because I definitely last season was like, Tonikawa's the best rom-com anime I've seen in forever, and now I've been watching Horimiya and I have loved every single episode of it. Nothing wrong, flawless. I mean, I'm invested in every single character just the way I was invested in Tonikawa. And maybe Horimiya has like a slight edge because it's the studio is Cloverworks, and I love Cloverworks work. especially their animation style is just absolutely like top tier. My number one favorite kind of animation style. So even though I absolutely loved Tonikawa and I thought it was super unique and I loved it, I think Horimiya might just barely edge Tonikawa out. But Horimiya is like just this hilarious, super sweet slice of life, school, romance anime. The focus is mainly on these two characters, Miyamura and Hori-san, who essentially they go to school and kind of have these like personas that everyone knows them by, but then they get to know each other kind of like their at home personalities. So like at school, Hori is like a very like, you know, pretty girl, really confident, kind of like, you know, has friends and is really smart. And Miyamura, like, is this really quiet recluse who didn't really have friends at the beginning, but then you end up finding out, like, that he's got piercings and tattoos and is, like, super hot when he pulls his hair back and things like that. And Hori, outside of school, is essentially her younger brother's main caregiver because her mother works super crazy shifts because she's a nurse. So Hori is essentially more of a maternal motherly figure, which is not really her personality at school. So they kind of get to know those more intimate personal personas of each other. And so obviously they develop feelings for each other and it's super cute. I love it. This show is definitely going to be a 9 or 10 for me this season. I do not anticipate it letting me down. Honestly, if it goes at this rate, it will be one of my few 10s on my list, and I'm super excited I'm just excited to see where it goes. The next show on my list is the Mushoku Tensei, Jobless Reincarnation, and it is quite an interesting show. A lot of you know that I have been trying really hard to swear off isekai because I'm really sick and tired of watching isekai because I feel like it's such a rinse, wash, and repeat plot line with literally like these same plot points in every show with slightly different character personalities, but the like progression of the show is the same. I'm just tired of it, but this show ended up catching my eye, and so far I really haven't been that disappointed. I'm annoyed by Rudy, who's the main character who was reincarnated. I'm slightly irritated by the fact that he's a total perv. And because in his previous life, he was like a hikikomori / NEET who lived inside his house and contributed nothing to society and was a total sleaze and a total horn dog. And I mean, he got bullied at school, like, I mean, pretty much tortured at school, and his family, I guess, like, couldn't help him or didn't help him. I don't know what exactly happened, but I think, I don't know, whatever. His past life is more or less irrelevant, but anyway, he maintains his mental psyche from the previous life into his new life. So even though he's been reborn as like a baby, and I guess like for majority of this season, he's essentially been about like schoolboy age, like elementary schoolboy age, he has the mind of like a 40-year-old. So that's just been really annoying because I just don't like pervy characters. Like if you think like Mineta from My Hero Academia, like characters like that, just they're so irredeemable. But luckily Rudy does have a lot of redeeming characteristics, so like don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that he's like Mineta, who is entirely irredeemable in my opinion, but he does have a massive like horn dog streak, but he is trying to make the best of his new life, which I appreciate. He's a hard worker, and he is loyal, and he's a friend, and he can acknowledge, that he is a horn dog. So he's done somewhat well of not being like a total sleaze, but in other ways he's definitely been a total sleaze, so whatever. I don't know, the plot of the show has been engaging. I like the magic lore. I love all the characters so far, and according to, I don't quite remember, but I think it was either like the president or producer for Studio Bind was saying that the studio was literally created to animate this show. So I think like Studio Bind's like sole purpose and like sole reason for existence is to animate this show, and it's supposed to be long running. So I'm also interested to see how long I can stay interested in this show, since it's meant to be long running. Whatever interview I read, the guy was saying that he wanted this show to be kind of like the next Konosuba, and he wanted it to be a long running show. So I do know that there are quite a large number of light novel volumes that are out. So he's only a, like I said, like elementary school aged boy right now, and I know the show goes well into his adult years, or the light novel goes well into his adult years. So I imagine that the show will be around for a while, and I won't mind it being around for a while, at least for now. So if I had to give it a rating, I would give it, I don't know, I think right now I'd give it a 7 or 8. It's pretty good. I think right now I'd probably give it a 7. I don't know. It'll depend on where we are with Rudy's personality development. I feel like I already know it's a harem show, so I feel like when I get a better feel for what his relationships are like and how, like, whether he takes them seriously or he's just like a total sleaze the whole time, I feel like depending on what side of the line he falls on will determine if I give it a 7 or an 8. Okay, on to show number 6, which would be Shingeki no Kyojin, the final season. Honestly, the show is gonna be weird rating because I don't know. The season has been good. Don't get me wrong. It's been full of action, full of surprises. No, I stopped reading the manga around the cowboy arc. Everybody knows what the cowboy arc is, but yeah, I essentially stopped reading the manga around the cowboy arc. So I have no idea what this ending is supposed to look like or is going to look like. And I think it's a great season. It's definitely been a good watch, but I don't know. I didn't want the show when it first came out. I was hoping it wouldn't end with like humans versus humans, which is exactly what this has boiled down to. So subjectively, I'm like super disappointed that the plot is this, but for what the plot is and me accepting it for what it is, it would be wrong to give it a low score. So I don't know. I don't think I would have the heart to give it a 10 because at the end of the day, the show is not exactly what I was hoping for. So, you know, it's possible. It's possible that I'll give it a 9, and maybe if I'm being petty, I'll give it an 8. But chances are I have a strong feeling that Attack on Titan will end strong and it will continue at its current pacing, which is fantastic, beautiful pacing. I love it. If it continues at the current pace and the current action and excitement, I have a strong feeling Shingeki no Kyojin, the final season, will end with a 9 rating for me. Next on my list, we have Reincarnated as a Slime, Season 2. There's really not much to say about this season yet, to be honest, because I feel like Rimuru hasn't, like, appeared yet, right? Like, there's all this kind of, like, conflict going on, and he hasn't really appeared yet, and we all know that once he does appear, that everything will be resolved almost immediately. So I'm genuinely enjoying it right now because he's not involved, or they're not involved. Rimuru doesn't really have a gender. So I'm enjoying it. I do really enjoy the characters in Reincarnated as a Slime. And yes, I know it's another isekai, but whatever. I picked that show up before I was getting tired of isekai. Yeah, I'm enjoying it so far. All of the characters and a lot of the new characters I'm really enjoying. I'm really liking the dynamics between all of the new nations that are getting involved. I'm really enjoying these other humans that have kind of appeared on the scene who were also reincarnated into this world. And of course, their personalities are night and day to Rimuru's. So that's been kind of a really funny dynamic of kind of having those two, where you had Rimuru who came out like perfectly fine, and then you have these other three like awful human beings who got reincarnated as strong human beings in this new world. So that's kind of interesting as well. So far, I don't know. I feel like it's way too early to say what Reincarnated as a Slime Season 2 is going to be, because one, I do not know how many episodes it's going to be. My anime list has not put an end episode number there yet, so I don't even know if it's going to be over by the end of the winter season. And the thing about the first season was that it started off really strong, it kind of slowed down, it picked up, and then it dropped drastically at the very end. So pacing for the show has not always been great, and pacing is what will kill numbers for me. So for right now, I think I'd give it an 8, but it's possible I could drop it to a 6 if the pacing goes to hell in a handbasket. So I don't know. For right now, I'll keep optimistic rating. So my optimistic rating for this show is probably an 8. It could be a 9 if they wow me, and if pacing goes to hell in a handbasket, it would go down to probably a 6. Next show on the list is Uma Musume Pretty Derby Season 2. I know a lot of people hate on this show, but you shouldn't. It's a super cute show. I love it. It's horse girls essentially running track, aka they're race horses running on racetracks, and they're also idols. So if they win the race, if they're in the top 3, they perform in an idol show, which I think is like the most hilarious and wonderful thing ever. Like, could you imagine like at the Olympics, people like athletes from all over the world racing around a track, like an actual like track and field, and then after they run this massive race in the Olympics, the top 3 do a concert? Like, can you imagine? Like, that would be phenomenal. Also, that would just be unfair if you had the skill set to be like an Olympic athlete and also like a pop idol. Like, what? Anyway, maybe we can discuss that later. But anyway, I love Uma Musume. I love Uma Musume particularly because I love that a majority of the cast of Uma Musume are based off of real like racehorses that like really existed and really ran these races and really had these records. There are a few that are not real, but a majority of them are. So like if you look up their names, like Special Week and Rudolph, Silent Susanna, all of them, those are real racehorses that ran these exact races that they talk about in the show. And as a lot of you know, I'm a total like anime, like real life history nerd buff kind of thing. I love anything that kind of interacts with reality in some way. So that's why I love this show so much. Right now, the show is weird. I think the pacing of this show is like way too fast. I just have no idea where this show is ever going this season, which was not an issue in the first season at all. The first season, I had no issues with the pacing. And this season, I'm like, there was like 3 times where I was like, isn't this supposed to be the last race? Isn't this supposed to be the last race? Okay, I could have sworn this one was going to be the last race. Like, I've had that thought like 3 times, and we're only on episode like 5 or 6. And I'm like, good God, like, where does the end of this show go? And the reason why I don't know is one of the main horses of this season, she's not a real racehorse. So I don't know like what track record they're trying to create for her because it's not a real track record. So it'll be interesting to see where Uma Musume goes. But for right now, it's having some crazy pacing issues. So I'm honestly, if it stays at its current pacing, I'd probably give it a 5. If it can improve, I think the highest I'd be willing to give it is maybe a 7, but I don't know. It could surprise me. It could shock me, but I don't know. It's going to probably be somewhere between a 5 and a 7. And last but not least, and maybe the most controversial of the season so far, is The Promised Neverland Season 2. Where do I even begin with The Promised Neverland Season 2? I don't know. First of all, I think it's about to be literally the biggest flop of an anime that we've seen in a while. Like, I mean, all of us can think of many an anime where we don't acknowledge the second season. We just don't do it. We don't do it because it doesn't exist. We don't acknowledge it because it was just that bad. It wasn't good. You know, studios will then create other seasons that literally are supposed to overwrite our entire memory and existence of said second season. And The Promised Neverland second season is definitely shaping up to be one of those seasons that we just never talk about. And we'll only talk about how the first season was a total masterpiece and we loved it and it was great and had so much potential, and oh darn, why did we never get a second season? Because, guys, let me give y'all the gist of what has happened. So, long story short, Promised Neverland, the studio that's in charge of it, or whatever, the author, whoever's in charge of it, essentially said, you know, let's just yeet the source material and do our own thing. Which I've already discussed. I don't mind when studios yeet source material, but then the thing is you need to commit to not doing the source material and then just do your own thing. But when you try to have like the best of both worlds and then you rush things or you omit super serious things but then include minuscule minor other things, like, no, you're messy and you're sloppy. And that's exactly what The Promised Neverland Season 2 is. It is sloppy and it is messy. The pacing is all over the place. It's super fast. You can tell it's super fast. And I don't even read the manga, and I could tell it was fast. You're like watching and you're just like, wow, I felt like that should have lasted longer. It took them so long to get here and they were only there for like 4 minutes. I feel like they should have been there longer. And like the whole time you're just like, they keep running places and you're like, I just feel like they were supposed to stay somewhere longer. And then like these characters keep popping up and it's like, wow, I wasn't expecting them to pop up so soon. Well, only to find out they weren't. I don't know when they're diverging or why they're diverging or what they're planning on changing drastically from the source material, but right now it's like they're rushing through the existing source material, leaving out massive like arcs, leaving out massive characters that helped the characters we know and love develop, and then they're bringing back characters that aren't supposed to be back yet super soon, and it's jarring. It is super jarring and it's disorienting. And neither anime watchers or manga readers are enjoying this experience because the manga readers are up in arms because these major plot points have been erased or so grotesquely like butchered that there's just no saving it. And then the anime watchers like myself, we're watching this and we're like, wait, what just happened? Wait, what just happened? Wait, why did that happen? Wait, like, how did they just got there? Why are they already leaving? Like, we're just constantly in this, like, panicked frenzy trying to understand what's going on, and it's literally because they are literally hitting like the fast forward button on this show, but no one has really figured out why or where it's going, what direction they're trying to take it. And no, it's not a positive experience. So no, they're not doing it right, and it can be done right. And sure, like manga readers and hardcore, like, you know, source material fans might complain, but there's definitely merit in changing things so that anime watchers get a unique experience. But the experience that we're getting right now with the Promised Neverland second season, it ain't it. It ain't it. So honestly, if you're someone who watched the Promised Neverland season 1 and you enjoyed it, but you haven't started the second season yet, I would highly recommend that you don't. Save yourself and literally just pick up the manga from where the first season left off and let that be it, because the second season is a whole mess and none of us predict that it's going to get any better anytime soon. So, you know, maybe in my final rating episode I can give you better news, but for right now, it ain't it. So, what would I give the Promised Neverland season 2 rating right now? Yeah, it's around like maybe a 4 or a 5, and that 5 would be mega generous right now. I mean, it is just abysmal what is happening in the show right now, because I can't even enjoy the characters, I can't enjoy the kids, because just so much is happening so quickly that I am having a hard time processing or enjoying anything that's going on. So unfortunately, that's where that's at. And yeah, that's about it. Those are all the 9 shows that I'm currently watching. I am planning on possibly picking up Wave, which is the surfer anime. There's a new volleyball anime, I believe that's on Funimation, that I'm thinking of picking up. I think Other Side Picnic, I've been seeing some interesting highlights from that show, so I think I might pick that up at the end of the season as well. And I've been getting a few other recommendations here and there for shows I should pick up during the break week. So once I get that sorted out, I will let you guys know how that goes as well. But until then, thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I appreciate all your love and support. And until next time, I love you. Bye-bye, my sweeties.